Time for sound design. In this video, I'm going again beyond the loop. I'm gonna talk about a strategy that I use to not get stuck in a 4 or 8 bar loop and create a B part that kind of relates to the A part. So this is the second video on this topic. I will link down in the description to the first video I made on this, how to create a B part by not adding any new sounds, but using the existing sounds. In this video, the approach is to add one new sound. So still use the existing sounds from the A part, but sort of the rule that I set for myself is like I can add one more sound to create this variation. And the sound I'm gonna add is from the Numa plugin. I will link that also down in the description. So it's a free plugin from Studio Logic with a bunch of sampled instruments like pianos, electric pianos, stuff like that. So let's see what sound kind of fits with this loop. So I first play you the loop again. If you haven't seen the first video, it's this one. This loop kind of covers all the different kind of instruments and frequencies. You have this E minor 7th sample chord. There's a piano chord, a synthesizer, arpeggio, a bass line, 2 textures, a kick, a snare, and a sort of percussive brush element. And it's 8 bars, but it's basically 2 times 4 bars, and then there's some variation in the last 2 bars of the 8 bar loop. Let's go to the B part. Let's choose a sound from the Numa plugin, and let's create something new. The first thing to do is to set the loop points for the next 8 bars, and I'm going to use the Numa plugin, and let's open it up and see what kind of instrument could work. Maybe in the keys. I mean, they're all really good sounds, but it's more about what could fit with this. Strings could be nice. Maybe cellos. Let's leave it at that for now. The whole thing is written in E minor. So let's put the scale on here. Oh, it's already on E minor. Let's copy some of the elements that I want to keep. So maybe the bass line is something I want to keep. And let's change the loop point again. Same in the first video where I did that. I feel like this is such a defining element for the beat. So if I change this, you can immediately get sort of a different vibe. Maybe something like this. So it's more noise than actual instrument. The other sort of kind of quick tip that I want to point out is that when I create a variation of the sound in the other part, in the B part, I also give it a different color. So here you see that in the A part it's this color, and then I change the color. So I immediately know that I did something to it, because it might be difficult to see sometimes from the waveform. In the arpeggiated parts, I played an E minor 7 and a G7. So maybe I'm gonna, for the B part, use 2 different chords. So I had an E minor 7 and a G7, G major 7 that I've used. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so it's a 8 bar loop and I use 2 chords. So maybe I can use 2 different chords here. Maybe let's start with an A minor 7, put this an octave lower so it doesn't interfere. What if I play this? And then I want to go maybe to an E minor again, or a D. An F sharp. Maybe the F is too low. Okay, so this could actually work. So I'm changing the 2 chords, which means that I want to change the bass line as well. So the bass line fits the chords. And then I think having this kind of chord change that immediately creates a good difference between the A and the B part. So let's work on the bass line and then later think about the textures and the percussion. So here I put the F sharp 1 octave higher, so it's inverted, but I think the F sharp in the second octave is a bit too low. So let's write down the chord names. It's an A minor 7 and it's an F sharp minor 7th flat 5. I did have to look up that name of the chord, and then it's inverted as well, that the root note, the F sharp, is 1 octave higher. Let's work on the bass line. So the bass line is now playing a F sharp E C, and we want it to play notes from this chord, so an A, C, E, and a G. So definitely not the F sharp. So I can tune this to a G and also give it a different color, so I know it's. So that's actually, that works, just changing this one note. A, C, E. Yeah, so actually these notes work. Maybe just want to change the order of it. So if I want to follow the actual chord A, C, E, G, A, C, E, G, I just swap the C and the G. And then here I want to start with a F sharp, like this. Yeah, so this works. So now let's play the whole thing so far, maybe without the drums and without the textures, just to see how it sounds. So yeah, I think this kind of works. Let me do a little bit more work on the strings, because now they are kind of, I drew them in and they're all at the same velocity levels. Also, let's make it an 8-bar loop to create a bit of velocity difference in the chords. And then it's time to move on to the drums and do something with that. So now in the chords, it's a 4-bar loop, so I make it an 8-bar loop, and I'm gonna change some of the velocity of the notes to create a bit more variation, and also the starting points of the notes, so they don't start exactly at the same point in time. There's a bit of manual work. I mean, you can also just play them. So in terms of textures, I think I'm just gonna copy it and leave it for now. The arpeggiator sound on channel 4 I'm not going to use to create more contrast. So then it's only the percussion left, and I'm thinking, what if I actually group them in a channel, and then I can apply an effect to the entire drum bus. So the kick is going to play throughout the whole thing without this variation, and then at the end I want maybe a few more snares, going to signify the end. Let's see how that sounds. And maybe take out the bass in the last bar. Maybe the last kick as well. And I feel with the strings you get a little bit of sort of lo-fi vibes. So I'm thinking, what if I filter the drums for the second part, so they kind of more muted, and then they can open up with the snare roll in the end and then go back to part A. Because I think part A is sort of the more chorusy part and part B is more the verse part. Let's try that. Let's put an auto filter on the entire drum bus, but then only enable it for part 2. So show and automation lanes, put it on here. Let's see how the transition is from A to B. I think this kind of works. Like it's mostly, of course, the snare and the hi-hat that gets muted, not the kick, because it's a low pass filter. And then in the end, the snare roll, I took the filter away because I want the snares to be sort of prominent. That really you kind of hear the transition back to part A. One thing that's left to do is to look at the sound of the strings, because now it's just a raw sound from the plugin, and maybe I want to add a little bit of effects to make it sound better with the rest of the instruments. So I want to lower the volume a bit, put a low cut. I'm thinking an auto pan to create a bit of stereo spread. Maybe just a bit of reverb as well, just a little splash. So let's see how that sounds now. That's it for this video. The approach that I use to create a beat part is to add only one instrument, and I choose to use the cellos of the Numa plugin. Let me check. Was it cellos? Yes, the cellos. Besides adding this instrument, so the main idea was to do a chord change. So the A part had an E minor 7 and an G major 7, and then I went to an E minor 7 and an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. That's a long name. Then the bass line follows this chord change, and the other main thing is to kind of mute the drums with a filter to create a difference in the percussion. So for the rest, the other elements are kind of similar, and of course I didn't play the arpeggiator to also have one less instrument, but you have the strings instead. So this was a fairly simple approach. It's quite straightforward to add one more layer. I think sometimes it's good to limit yourself, because now, for instance, with the snare roll, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I want a different snare to do the snare roll, but it's good to keep things simple just to get the idea down. And now when you have this B part, it's also easier to make like another part, like an intro or a break or a C part or anything like that. Let me know in the comments how you create a B part. If you have an A part, what kind of approaches you use. And stay tuned for the third video in this series, where I have another way to do this. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and see you in the next one.